Hi everyone, I hope you're good guy. Welcome to a new video. So today's video is about Ableton default template and how you can set your default Ableton template in order to speed up your workflow and make your life easier basically. So today we're gonna work in Ableton Live 10 first, and then we will jump into Ableton Live 11. As usual, the template will be available for free. You can download them. And yeah, let's have a look inside Ableton. So the first things about template is the main problem is can be intimidating in the way that you already, when you set your template, you already have a lot of track, and sometimes you can feel blocked by all of this track and kind of intimidated because it's busy, it's messy. That's something I feel. And one thing about template is to don't be shy to get rid of things you don't need. Like if you feel like there is too many track and it's kind of overwhelming you, just select them and just delete them. And that's happened sometimes, and then I just use the one I like and I just create some new. So one thing before to jump into the track, one thing I like to do is if you do Control T, you have an audio track, and you can see by default I have utility and EQ, and that's my default audio track. So if you right click here, you can save your track as a default audio track. So by default you will have something like this. But I've set up the way that I always have a utility and EQ, because utility for gain automation and panning, sometimes mono and put the bass in mono, and EQ because I usually always use an EQ. So I put my utility EQ8 and I save as default. And same for MIDI. If you do Control Shift T, I've got a MIDI track with straight away coming up an EQ8 and the utility. Just little detail, but that saves you times. So the first track you can see here is a sidechain. So this is basically a 909 clap that I will use as a trigger for all of my sidechain compression. So for every other track that I will use sidechain compression as input, I will always select this track. You can see here it's a sample. It's basically a 909 clap. The length is 1 beat. This way it works every time the kick hit, and you need to put it in send only because you don't want to hear it. You just want to use it as a trigger. And for example, if I go to bass here, I have my compressor. So I always set my sidechain compression the same way. So you have to activate the sidechain and you select your audio from your sidechain here. And then my setting usually for sidechain compression is the ratio at 4, fast attack. The release I usually left at default, and then after I just bring down the threshold according to how much of the effect I want. So that's it for sidechain. So the first track I will always have is what I call kick low. Basically it's a drum rack with, I just put a simpler by default like this. I just have to drop a kick. I use the drum rack by default because it can happen sometimes I will layer kicks, so this way I can straight away drop other kick there and layer them, pitch them differently. The other thing I might use from time to time is my industrial kick rack. In that case I will just drop it and I can just here drop kick sample, but this one I use less often, that's why it's not by default. And then I have the rack for the rumble, kick verb, the rack kick punch, which is helping sometimes the kick cut through the mix, and this one which is kick verb top, which kind of can create a kind of reverb offbeat in the top hand. So these three are by default. I'm not always using all of them for each track, but they are here, and if I don't need them I just remove them, but most of the time I use them. And then I have a drum bus because sometimes as overall process drum bus work well, and then an EQ with just high cut at 30 Hz and the limiter just in case things goes crazy. So that's for the kick. Then I have a track with tom. So you can see I use a lot MIDI. I use mainly MIDI. I barely use audio loops, mainly because you can really sequence the way you want, create your own pattern rather than audio loops. It's more steady, you cannot really do that. And I use my tom rumble. The reason being like this, I can kind of trying to create tom pattern rolling stuff. But again, here sometimes if I want like just a single rolling tom, I will, for example, scrap this, delete, create a new MIDI track, just drop a tom and create a new pattern from that. It really depends if I already have something in mind or if I want to experiment. So if I want to experiment, I will probably scrap it and start from scratch. If I have something I want to go fast and I have an idea and I know what to do and what is going to work, I just use the rack and move on. So for all of the rack, I will put the link in the description. Then I have sidechain compression, obviously, because you will need to leave space for the kick and add a bit of movement as well. And then EQ utility as usual. Then we have my hats. So here I have my drum rack for the hats. I will put the link in the description again. I want if you want to grab it. It's a rack I made. It's just make my life easier. I have already pretty much everything set up, and if you go here you can have the send and return, and you can see I have some reverb and delay to quickly add a bit of room to your hats, add a bit of delay to make them a bit more groovier, and add a bit of shuffle. And then I've pre-mapped some other extra feature like the decay if I want to play with the decay or with the pitch of the ride, with the decay of the reverb. So this way it's super fast. I just drop samples and move on. So here again, if I have, for example, that I have an idea, I want to put it down and I know the hats, I don't really want to spend too much time working on my hat, so I will just use that and speed up. But it can happen sometimes, again, if I want something, I want to experiment a little bit, because let's say I want to ride a little bit dirtier, or I want the open hats a little bit more powerful than usual, I will probably create a new track especially for that. So again, template is great because it's a good starting point, but you don't always need to follow exactly your template. Don't feel ashamed to scrap, even if it's 80% of your template, just scrap it and start something new. That's something I was, at the beginning I was like, oh, you know, I create this template, but I don't use that much. That's fine. Worst case scenario, that can happen. If after 6 months you realize there is one track you don't really use that much, just get rid of it, save your new template, so this way every time you start, there is no diss track that you don't use that much. And then I have a drum bus. It's just mainly to have a bit of drive, overall compression. That really depends. Sometimes I use, sometimes no. And then the limiter. Again, limiter, I usually, you can see that often I have a limiter. It's not really like acting as a limiter. It's just like sometimes when you experiment, things can go crazy. So it's always good to have a limiter. Just like this, you save your ears, your speakers, whatever you're using. But yeah, it's never really acting as a limiter. You know, I don't put this to just crush everything. That's not the point. It's just like a kind of a security, like a seat belt, basically. Then I have a bass one. So this is something I once get rid of because I wasn't using it that much. And now I'm bringing it back because I try to use more bass line and less rumble lately. It's a MIDI track again, so I can just drop operator, wavetable, whatever, and start to create my patch, add a bit of harmonic, then sidechain compression again, EQ, utility. Alright, that is pretty much to what it said by default. Then you see you have two MIDI track. I add two is because I know that at one point I will grab wavetable operator and I will drop it and start to create something, so that's why I left them. But on some of my previous one, I had, like, for example, a MIDI track called Synth, one called Pad, where I put more rack and more effect and more stuff like that, but I felt that it was more overwhelming me than really helping me, because I was feeling like, okay, I need to use that, but sometimes I didn't want it to use, but you feel to use it because you put it, you know, it's kind of a weird feeling. So now I just leave this blank MIDI file and I know I can use whatever I like, and I don't put too many because I don't want to have like 15 tracks, which I'm not gonna use, basically. So yeah, I don't have audio track by default because I rarely use audio track except if I need to record something, but usually I don't use that much audio loop, and if I need, I can just create one. Alright, and then we have my hardware. So this is, I have three hardware sent, which are the Mini Bridge 2S, the Sub 37, and the Microfig. Basically, I've set a MIDI track with an external instrument already set, so you can see it deactivated because it's not always, I'm not gonna use all three sends all the time in the same time for each track, so I deactivate them like this. I save CPU, and as well, when you render after, you don't have this real-time problem that if you let activated, it will always render in real time. So it's already set. All of them are USB sent, so I can straight away connect them to Ableton. Ableton recognize them, so after you just have to select according to the track you want. And the audio, this is something I recommend as well to do. It's renaming your audio input, so this way you can easily know which one is which one. So that's pretty handy. And then just an EQ and the utility. And so I've done that for the Sub 37. The Sub 37 has, oh, you can see here, it's mistake. The Sub 37 has a VST as well, which is great to kind of select a preset or save a preset, or just sometimes if I need, it can be great as well. I just put configure and I select, for example, the cutoff and the envelope, and maybe let's say the resonance, and like this they are on my push to, which is just in front of me, and I don't need to, for example, turn myself to go on the Moog and to tweak. I can just straight away automate the parameter on my push, and that's pretty handy. And then I have the Microfig, which is the same things, and I just messed up the input here, but, and then I have audio track where I will usually, this is for example if I'm like just kind of jamming with a synth, or I'm just experimenting with a synth, I will just record, and like this I have the audio from what I've just done. Then you have the Rytm, so that's my analog drum machine that I have bought recently. The cool thing as well with this machine is USB class compliance, and you have the overbridge as well, so it's a software which allows you to basically, even though it's an analog drum machine, you can control everything and save all the parameter, all the automation. And on top of that is the cool things is, you see you have, it's an 8 voice analog drum machine, and you have the 8 track here. If you go to, basically if you create a MIDI track, you put the overbridge here, and then you just, for example, let me do it like this live, create a new track, and you select the track where there is your Rytm MIDI here. Then after you have all of the output of your analog rhythm that you can select. So that's what I've done for each of them: bass drum, snare drum. And so this way I can either have the master of the analog rhythm is coming into Ableton, or I can either have each track individually and process with effect individually. So I work with both. It happened even once I had actually both in the same time. So I had the master plus the original, and it's actually created something cool, but it was kind of a happy accident. But yeah, that's the way it works. And everything is in group, because obviously if you don't put them in group, it's taking too much space. And again, it's like you have a very wide session, which is very messy, and which is for me counterproductive. And then I have just a rack here, which is a 909 kind of rack. It's like the core from Ableton, but with my own sample. And this is something that changed with Ableton Live 11, because Live 11 have pretty dope 909 and 808 core kit by default. So this is gonna be scrapped in the Ableton Live 11 template. But yeah, it's still there for the Live 10, because you always need 909 sample, either it's a clap, a snare. And then you have this SubMixdown Mixdown. Just before, we're gonna talk about Rytm. So here you have 2 Rytm. Basically this Rytm, they are kind of reverb washout effect. So you send your element into this kind of Rytm, and it's deep into a lot of reverb, and you get this washy, messy effect, which can be great usually for build up and breakdown, this kind of stuff. So both are pretty much similar. This is from Make Your Transition. I will put the link in the description. It works as a treat. This, I usually use it, for example, just before you break, I start to send my whole track or some element into that Rytm, and it's kind of automatically creating noisy SFX, which help the transition. And then we have the master. So on the master, I just have the limiter. Again, it doesn't work. It's just like in case things get crazy, to don't blow up my ear or my speakers. But I never put like something crazy like to have my mix super loud, or I don't do that. It's just like security again. And so now let's come to SubMixdown and Mixdown. So you can wondering why I have these 2 channels. So basically, first, that is completely, it's very personal, but it's the way I like to work, to keep things clear. First, my master, I don't want any effect, anything on my master. The only thing I could accept is a mastering chain or effect related to mastering, but that is usually I keep everything clear. It's just because I just don't want to mess it with, this is like your final output just before you export, so it has to be clear. I don't want some effect that you don't know what they're gonna do to the sound. I just want things clear. So that's why I created this Mixdown is Mixdown. So basically Mixdown is like if it was my master. I have a low cut and the washout effect. This is what I call master FX. So it's different than the mastering chain. It's master FX. So it's like effect that will apply to the whole track. Basically, for example, you have a low cut and you have this washout effect, which is gonna put the whole track into a lot of delay and reverb, which is perfect for build up and breakdown. So this, I didn't want it to put them on my master. That's why I create this Mixdown. Now the thing is, you can see I've created a SubMixdown as well. The reason being so that is my master track, and sometimes I want to send it to the Rytm, like I said, to help with the transition. The problem is, okay, I can send it to this Rytm, but I want this Rytm as well to be affected by my master FX, But here I just have a riser, but for example, if I have a beat repeat or something else on top, I want my Rytm to be affected by my master effect. So that's why you need to send everything first to what I've called SubMixdown. So everything, all of my track here, you can see the output is going to SubMixdown. So here you need to put no input, monitor in. This way, if I want to send my master to the Rytm, I can do it here and here. So the signal goes to my Rytm, and here on the Rytm, if I select Mixdown, it's going to the Mixdown. And so this track, basically, it's taking the output of the SubMixdown and of the Rytm. Everything goes together here, and then after I have my master FX, which apply to the whole track. If you don't do that, basically what's gonna happen, it's here you're gonna, if you don't have the SubMixdown, here you're gonna send your whole track mix to your Rytm, and your Rytm is gonna do exactly that. It's gonna create a feedback loop, because basically you send something to the Rytm, and the Rytm go back to the input of the mixdown, which is going again back to the Rytm, and it's kind of creating this feedback loop, which is very annoying. Obviously you can avoid to have an extra track. If I was putting my master FX on the master straight away, I wouldn't need basically the SubMixdown. I could just send everything to the mixdown, and I could send this to the master, and then I can here send all of my mix to the Rytm, and so my mixdown and my Rytm all goes to the master, and then after I have my master FX. But like I said, I don't want my master FX on my master track, just because, for example, after if you start to do your mastering, you're gonna start to add EQ, compressor, and it's gonna be mixed. You don't gonna remember which one is part of the mastering, which one are master effect, and can get messy, and no reason for that. Just keep things clear. So yeah, that's personal choice. All right, so now I wanted to talk about a couple of other tips to improve your workflow. So I talk about default track, default audio track, default MIDI track, and let's talk about default presets. So for example, for this reverb, this is my default reverb setting. This is something like one day I just work with reverb and I say, okay, I want a good preset which kind of sound good in any kind of situation. I wanted a clean reverb and something that if I choose a short decay, I can have kind of a room reverb. If I have something longer, can be great for synth sound, or like vocal if you work with vocal. And if I want something a bit more like for ambience or background stuff, I will be able to put like something around 15 seconds, and maybe I have more dry wet, and we will work. And that's my default preset, and it works exactly the way I want. It works well. And I've made a few presets. I have 3, so you can see I have a room, plate, big sky, which more or less what I've just described, you know, one room, the plate maybe more for like the synth and vocal, and then after the big sky, which is more like the ambient one. So that's actually a different one, but you see with the decay time around 12 seconds, this is perfect for pad sound and stuff like that. And I work the same way with delay. For example, delay, I've noticed that I often put my feedback around 30%, my dry wet around 30%. I often use ping pong. I often use the delay sync at 3 and a bit of filter. So I've set that by default this way. You know, obviously I'm not gonna always keep the same, but for example, I will most of the time change the time, maybe change a bit the filter according to the sound you're working with, ping pong or no, if you want stereo or no. But then the dry wet and the feedback, more or less we stay the same, and that saved me a time. Again, I have this preset that I call stereo width, which is the hash effect. If you don't know what it is, just Google it. It's basically a kind of a stereo effect. You delay one of your channel, either the left or the right, and by slightly delaying, you kind of trick your brain and have the impression that the sound is stereo. And so that I just drop it and I have instantly a stereo width effect. I usually just play with the time according to the sound you want. Sometimes it's a bit less or more. And I've done that with a lot. For example, with the chorus, it's worked this way, and that's really helped me, because then I don't have to all the time reparameter everything the way I want. It's already set, and I know what I have to tweak if I want something different. Okay, other thing I want to talk about, which is something I do a lot. For example, when I finish a track, if there is element on this track that I really like, for example, it can be the hats, or for example, let's say ambience that I really like. What I like to do it, you can basically in Ableton, for example, you have your MIDI track, and let's say here you have your effect, and you have your preset that you tweak. You can just grab the clip and go to clip, and so you can see here I have this one here. Basically this folder, this is everything coming from old project. So you can see leg side is the name of the track, reset, hat, and kicks. You have a lot of stuff, and for example, I will say like template Synth, and this way next time, for example, oh, I really like this preset, this patch, and I want to reuse it maybe in another project because this is kind of my sound, let's say, I can just then after just grab and drop it, and it's avoiding you to reopen an old track to copy, save, and then reopen it again, the track you're working on, and dropping it. So I do that a lot. That's really helpful. And I do the same, for example, to save idea. You can see here some idea. For example, when I'm working on the track and I'm looking for a sound, and then another ID came out, instead of to getting disturbed by this new ID coming out, what I'm doing is I'm saving this ID here in this folder, and like this I will reopen it when I finish the track I'm still working on. So again, one thing I like to use, you can see here the collection. So I have first one, this is all of my personal preferences, so samples, loops, and then this is all the instrument I've just show you. It's straight away here, access. I straight away have access. I have some other rack, and then I have all of the rack that I use, who are classed by kind of type. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So it's always trying to find the balance between having something like it's gonna speed up your workflow, and this kind of habit that you notice you have, like you always use this, or you always use this preset that way. So you can save it as a default. The problem is obviously you will feel like you're always using the same, always working the same way. So that can be the danger as well. So that's why you have to don't be shy to sometimes just scrap everything and just like say, okay, fuck it. I know I've made a template, but I'm not gonna use this that way this time. And like this, you can find the right balance between having a fast workflow, but not always working the same way. And obviously template is very personal. It's really depend of how you want to work. So if you want to check in live 11, so you can see I have in live 11 is exactly the same things. I just have this one is that's my samples is gonna be scrapped because there is these two new corky there. I mean, there was by default in live 10, but they kind of resample it, and I really like how they're sounding now. So you always need sometimes a 909, like I said, claps or 808. So yeah, and this I have another extra return here that's kind of a pitch reverse effect. This is something I was using in my live performance that I've put it by default here. Other than that, it's the same. Yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you liked. Don't forget to like and subscribe. The templates are available for free. Link in the description for live 10, live 11. And see you soon, guys. Bye bye.